Hello, and 皆さん、こんにちは。How nice to meet you. My name is Motoko, and I am a storyteller. Originally, I grew up in Osaka, Japan, but now I live in the state of Massachusetts, which is in Northeast. And it is my special pleasure to be part of your Japanese culture summer camp. And today I'm here to tell you some interesting stories and also do a story making activities with you. Okay? So I'd like to start with our story. This is the most important story of the day. And it's called Mr. Bump and Mr. Lump. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in Japan, there lived two old men. They lived in a little village at the foot of a mountain. They grew up together. They were about the same age, and they lived next door to each other. They were neighbors. Well, also, these two old men had one unusual thing in common. Each of them had a bump about the size of a chicken egg on his cheek. The old man had this bump on his right cheek. The other one had it on his left cheek. Those bumps were smooth to touch and they did not hurt or itch. But because of this unusual feature, those two old men were kind of well known in the village, and all the village children knew them. The village children also knew that these two old men, even though they looked alike, were very different inside. The old man who had the bump on his right cheek was kind and cheerful and jolly. So the children affectionately called him Mr. Bump. Everybody say Mr. Bump. The other old man, with the strange bump on his left cheek, though, was mean and greedy and gruff. So the children nervously called him Mr. Lump. Everybody say Mr. Lump. Well, Mr. Bump, the kind old man, loved dancing. He was a great dancer, and the children loved to visit him. Whenever they came over, Mr. Bump would say, "Come on, kids, welcome. Now let's dance." And he would teach them all the latest cool moves. Now, everybody, let me see you do the cool move. The cool move you have. Is that it? Oh, I see some of you are making very cool moves. Well, however, Mr. Lump, the mean old man, hated dancing and hated the children. Whenever the kids came over to his neighbor's house, he would stick his head out of the... Is somebody on sharing the... Oh, sorry, I'm going to stop for a second. Someone is doing the share screen, and it's Cassandra. Would you please not share your screen? Thank you. Okay. So whenever the kids gathered together in his neighbor's house, Mr. Lump would stick his head out of the window and yell, "Be quiet! You're making too much noise! Now go away and stay away!" Well, one autumn day, Mr. Bump, the kind old man, went up the mountain to get some firewood. He worked all day long and made himself a great big bundle of wood to take home, when suddenly it began to rain. Pelted by the big raindrops coming down fast, Mr. Bump found a tall, hollow Japanese cedar tree and crawled inside the tree to avoid the rain. "I guess I must wait until the rain stops," he murmured to himself, feeling suddenly very tired. Listening to the sound of the steady rain, soon he fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, he was awakened by loud, gruff voices. "Hey, lucky thing that we found this big bundle of wood. Hurry up, get the fire going." It took me a moment for Mr. Bump to remember where he was. And it took another minute for him to realize that he had slept far too long and it was already nighttime. Holding his breath, he peeked out and saw that the rain had stopped. A bright moon was shining high in the cloudless sky. About 20 feet away, he noticed a little grassy clearing. And in the middle of that clearing was a great roaring bonfire, surrounded by a dozen or so huge shadowy figures. It was the Oni, terrible, fearsome mountain demons. They had horns of a bull and fangs of a tiger. Some of them had bright red shiny faces. The other ones had pale blue faces, and yet the others had hairy green faces. They were all clad only wearing animal skin loincloths, and they were sitting around the fire, talking and laughing loudly. Some were roasting some wild animal meat on the fire. The others were drinking strong-smelling rice brew. I have heard of these creatures in stories, but I never knew they were real, Mr. Bump thought, trembling with fear. I have heard that Oni likes to eat humans. I must be very quiet so that they won't find me. Suddenly, a great big red-faced Oni, the biggest one of all, stood up and yelled, "Make music! Let the dance begin!" 3 of the Onis picked up strange instruments and started to play. The rest of the Onis began dancing around the fire. The old man had never heard such music before, and he loved it. Before he knew it, he started to shake his head to the rhythm of the music. He began to move his shoulders. Everybody move your shoulders. And he began to snap his fingers and began to wiggle his feet. And without even thinking about it, he jumped out of the hollow of the tree and joined the Onis dancing around the fire. Suddenly, the Onis stopped dancing, and the music stopped, and they were all staring at Mr. Bump. "Who are you?" the great big red Oni demanded. "Are you a human?" I'm sorry, I'm just a..." Mr. Bump was so scared he could hardly speak. "Well, whatever you are," the big red Oni bellowed, "you are a great dancer. Now keep on the music."
I know this story.
So the old man, Mr. Bump, joined the Onis, and they danced and danced around the fire all night and had a great time. When the eastern sky began to light up a little, and they could hear the first crow of a rooster far off in the distance, finally Oni stopped dancing. "Time for us to go, old man," the great big Oni said. He was the chieftain of all the Onis. "Here, I'll give you this for dancing so well." And he handed Mr. Bump a small piece of rock. Are you going to come back tomorrow to dance with us again?" I don't know, sir." "Well, in that case, you must leave something important with us so that we know you will come back." "What about that bump on your face? Is that a treasure? It looks kind of cool." and the big red Oni reached over with his huge hands and grabbed Mr. Bump's bump on his cheek. And magically, it came off in the Oni's huge hand. No blood, no pain, no scars. Now Mr. Bump's cheek was as smooth as a baby's bottom. You can have it back tomorrow, the Oni shouted as they scrambled up the mountain and disappeared, leaving Mr. Bump all by himself, dazed and speechless. As if awakened from a dream, he staggered back home, but pretty soon he found out that it was not a dream at all. His bump was really gone, and when he got home, he discovered that small piece of rock that Oni gave him was a nugget of pure gold. Now Mr. Bump was rich. The story spread throughout the village. People soon found out that the Mr. Bump no longer had a bump, so they all flocked to hear the amazing story. Now that you don't have a bump anymore, what should we call you? The children asked the old man. Well, you can still call me Mr. Bump because I kind of like the name and I'm used to it. Mr. Lump, though, the greedy and gruff neighbor, when he heard the story, he was green with envy. He came over to Mr. Bump's house and said, "Tell me exactly where that tall hollow tree is. I want gold and I want to get rid of my bump too." "Oh, Mr. Lump, you don't know how to dance, right? I can teach you." "Ah, never mind. How hard could it be? Just a stupid dance." Mr. Lump went up the same mountain, into the same forest, and found the same tall, hollow Japanese cedar tree. He hid inside and waited until the nighttime. When the bright moon shone high up in the cloudless sky, the Onis came back. They quickly built a bonfire and began to dance. Ready? I hope everybody's dancing with me. Mr. Lump crawled out of the hole of the tree and said, "Hello, nice to see you again." All the Onis turned. "Oh, hi, welcome back, old man," the big red Oni said. Then he said, "Wait, you look different." "No, it's just the same old me," ha 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 ha, Mr. Lump said, trying to pretend that he was Mr. Bump. "All right, doesn't matter. Go ahead and let's dance." So they danced and danced. The music soared into the moonlit sky. But do you think Mr. Lump danced well? No. He had never danced before in his life. He hated dancing, he hated music, and he had no sense of rhythm. So all the moves he made were wooden and slow and stiff and boring. Now everybody makes slow and stiff and boring moves. Finally, the chieftain of the Oni said, "Enough." The music stopped and everybody, all the Onis were looking at Mr. Lump. "What happened to you, old man? Your dance tonight is terrible. You let us down." "Now, maybe we should eat him up," another Oni suggested, licking his hairy lips. The frightened and desperate Mr. Lump thought of an idea. He hid his mouth with the sleeve of his kimono, like this, and imitated the crow of a rooster. "Ko-ke-ko-ko!" "What? It's dawn already? We must hurry." All the Onis jumped up and, packing up their things quickly, turned to scramble up the mountain. The chieftain of the Oni spun around and said, Here, you can have your treasure back. And he threw something at Mr. Lump's face. Thinking it might be gold, Mr. Lump reached over to catch it, but instead the thing hit him on his right cheek and got stuck there. Feeling his face with both of his hands, he realized that now he had two lumps on his face. One lump on his right cheek, the other one on his left, because the Oni gave him the bump from Mr. Bump's face. Mr. Lump was left all by himself in the darkness, for now even the moon had hidden behind the clouds. He cried and cried all night long. Hot tears of anger and embarrassment ran down his lumpy cheeks. Finally, he cried himself to sleep on the cold, wet grass. Then suddenly he was awakened by small, worried voices. "Mr. Lump, are you all right? Mr. Lump, wake up!" It was the village children he used to chase away. "What do you want from me?" he growled. "Go ahead and laugh at me. I got two lumps on my face. You all hate me anyway." "We don't hate you," the children said. "Mr. Bump asked us to come and check on you. Come on, Mr. Lump, let's go home, and Mr. Bump will teach us all how to dance." So all the village children helped Mr. Lump get up and brought him home. And that's